October 1943. The coastal plains of Salerno, Italy. The air still carried the scent of cordite and pulverized olive groves. The Allied invasion, Operation Avalanche, was a grinding, brutal reality. But on this humid autumn morning, the soldiers of the Italian Royal Army's Reggimento Corazzato were not fighting. They were scavenging. In the wreckage of a skirmish near a hastily abandoned American roadblock lay a prize, an M8 light armored car, a sleek, six-wheeled vehicle the Americans proudly called the Greyhound. It was a machine that, to the weary Italian troops, represented the frightening industrial might of the New World, fast, modern, and intimidatingly efficient. But, as with all things in war, first impressions can be fatally misleading. The capture itself was almost anticlimactic. The crew had been caught off guard by a flanking maneuver, abandoning the vehicle intact before it could be fully disabled. Now, under the critical, skeptical eyes of Major Vittorio Rossi, a tank commander with a deep and almost theological appreciation for armored thickness, the Greyhound was winched onto a captured flatbed and spirited away, not to the battle lines, but to the silence of a hidden ordnance testing facility outside Rome. Rossi was a man who understood the nature of industrial warfare. He knew that for every Panther tank the Germans built, the Americans seemed to stamp out 10 more machines. The only way to survive was to understand the enemy's weaknesses, to find the microscopic crack in the giant's armor. The M8 was a revelation to the Italian mechanics. It was a stark departure from the slow, heavily riveted and often obsolete armored cars of the Axis. It boasted a powerful Wright Continental R975 engine, giving it a road speed nearing 90 kilometers per hour. Its low profile and sophisticated suspension promised superior scouting capabilities. This was the future of mechanized reconnaissance, a sharp tool for a mobile war. Yet Major Rossi, running a gloved hand over the vehicle's sloped hull, felt a profound unease. It felt too light. The official American designation was light armored car. But in the hands of the Axis engineers, the specifications quickly told a different story. The M8's primary protection was nominal. Its front hull, the critical point for deflecting incoming fire, was only 16 millimeters thick. The sides and rear were a frighteningly thin 9.5 millimeters. This was the central irony of the Greyhound, a vehicle designed to conduct aggressive reconnaissance and provide fire support, equipped with armor barely capable of protecting its crew from heavy machine gun fire, let alone anti-tank rounds. The Americans had prioritized speed, mobility, and the firepower of the 37mm M6 gun over crew survival. It was a technological gamble, a philosophy of war that relied on avoiding the punch rather than absorbing it. Quote, a former Italian engineer's perspective, reflecting on the initial capture, perhaps from a later memoir. When the Greyhound arrived, the men were stunned by its cleanliness, its complexity. But Captain Luca, our chief engineer, tapped the side panel. It sounded like a drum. He said, "They built a race car, not a tank. If we can find the right drumstick, this drum will break." The testing phase was organized with military secrecy. Rossi's team, a collection of some of Italy's most resourceful engineers and ballistics experts, was given a single directive: determine the minimum caliber required to penetrate the M8's armor at combat range. They moved the captured machine into a secured firing range, a desolate stretch of quarry where the only witnesses were the stones and the indifferent sky. Initial tests were conducted using standard German and Italian anti-tank rifles and machine guns, weapons they knew were readily available across the front lines. The German 7.92mm Mauser AP round, a ubiquitous bullet that Allied soldiers rightly feared, was fired against the 9.5mm side plate. The result was immediate, shocking, and historically significant. The round, designed for penetration against softer targets, consistently pierced the armor, creating a clean, lethal hole. This was not a lucky shot or a glancing blow. This was systematic vulnerability. The armor, instead of deflecting the projectile, merely slowed it down on its journey to the interior. The implications of this failure were staggering. A crew inside an M8, even when struck by a common rifle-caliber anti-armor round, was not just endangered, it was effectively unprotected. The enemy's perception of the M8, a fast, menacing, well-armed reconnaissance vehicle, was about to undergo a terrifying transformation. The secret of the Greyhound's thin skin was now in Axis hands. The stage was set for the central revelation of the documentary. The Americans had unleashed a beast of burden that, under pressure, revealed itself to be a glass cannon. The technological marvel was, in fact, a strategic liability. And the men who were about to expose this flaw were about to hand the Axis a deadly psychological advantage. To truly understand how this single discovery would ripple across the battlefields of Europe, affecting everything from intelligence reports to the terrified mindset of the American crews, stay tuned. Hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss the unfolding chapters of this critical historical turning point. The next chapter reveals the agonizing precision of the Axis testing regime and the grim statistics that validated Major Rossi's worst fears. The quiet facility outside Rome became a laboratory of destruction. Major Rossi and his chief ballistics officer, Captain Leonardo Rizzo, treated the captured M8 not as a trophy, but as a textbook, a critical opportunity to reverse engineer the Allied doctrine of maneuver warfare. Captain Rizzo, a meticulous man whose background was in industrial steel composition before the war, approached the vehicle's armor like a surgeon dissecting a vital organ. His team used calibrated measuring equipment, analyzing the precise composition of the rolled homogeneous steel used in the M8's construction. The findings confirmed Rossi's gut feeling. The steel quality was good, but the volume was deficient. The American design philosophy was clear: weight savings trumped survival. The focus quickly shifted to the how and where of penetration. It wasn't enough to know the armor could be pierced. They needed the tactical blueprint for how to do it efficiently, under fire, using standard infantry weapons. The first phase of detailed testing involved a range of small arms calibers, specifically those issued to frontline German and Italian infantry. The most critical weapon was the 7.92 57mm Mauser round, loaded with a steel-cored SMK, Scharfes mit Kern, armor-piercing projectile. This projectile, moving at approximately 800 meters per second, proved lethal against the thin side plates of the M8. Rizzo's team established a penetration kill zone, PKZ radius. They found that at ranges up to 100 meters, the SMK round had a near-perfect 95% chance of complete penetration through the 9.5mm side armor when striking at a near-perpendicular angle. Even the more heavily sloped 16mm glacis plate at the front, while offering some protection, could be defeated by heavier rounds or the sheer volume of concentrated fire. But the most chilling discovery lay in the M8's weakest point: the turret roof and engine deck, which were protected by a mere 6.35mm of armor. This paper-thin covering was designed purely to protect against shrapnel and overhead fragments, not direct fire. Rizzo demonstrated that even the standard 12mm, 50 caliber, heavy machine gun, a weapon ubiquitous in the Axis arsenal, could rip through the top of the Greyhound with impunity. The irony was crushing. The M8 Greyhound, a spearhead of American reconnaissance, could be disabled by the very German heavy machine gun, the MG-42, it was designed to avoid. The sound of the MG-42, famously nicknamed Hitler's buzzsaw, could strike terror into the heart of any infantryman. Now it was about to become the doom of the American armored car crews, turning their advanced vehicle into a high-speed metal coffin. The Italian report, meticulously detailed and filled with technical schematics showing the optimal impact angles, concluded that the M8 was highly vulnerable to all infantry-carried anti-tank weapons and, critically, to concentrated fire from heavy machine guns. Quote, a German colonel's reaction after receiving the intelligence report. The report was a miracle. We had seen these fast, daunting American cars and assumed a heavy anti-tank gun was required. We were wasting shells. The Italian mechanics showed us that all we needed was coordination and an MG-42 with the right ammunition. It turned our fear into confidence. The findings were immediately flagged up the chain of command, first to the Italian High Command, and then rapidly shared with their German allies. This intelligence transfer was not just a sharing of data. It was the birth of a new tactical doctrine specifically targeting the M8. The shift was profound. Previously, encounters with the M8 demanded the deployment of anti-tank guns like the German PK-40 75mm, a valuable asset that was slow to deploy and better used against heavy tanks. Now the directive was simplified. Engage Greyhounds with concentrated machine gun fire, aiming for the side hull and turret top. This meant the fight was brought down to the infantry level. A single squad, armed with an MG-42 and a box of armor-piercing rounds, could now confidently ambush and destroy a vehicle previously thought to be immune. The immediate effect was psychological. The German infantry, often feeling outgunned and outmatched by American production, suddenly found a cheap, efficient and readily available counter to the enemy's speed. The fast-moving Greyhound, designed for surprise, would now be met with a surprise of its own. A fusillade of heavy machine gun fire that transformed a routine scouting mission into a potential massacre. The Italian mechanics, by simply testing a captured machine, had done more than prove a vehicle's flaw. They had given the Axis a powerful confidence-boosting weapon, knowledge. They had stripped the Greyhound of its aura of invincibility, turning it from a menacing predator into vulnerable prey. As the intelligence spread across the European theater, the operational environment for the M8 Greyhound crews changed dramatically and terrifyingly. The Americans, who had championed the M8 for its speed and reconnaissance capability, were unaware that their enemy now possessed the key to its weakness. The M8 was, by all accounts, a comfortable and effective vehicle. It was a favorite among its crews, who appreciated its smooth ride, open-top turret for better visibility, and reliable operation. They called it the Light 6, or simply the M8. For them, it was their eyes and ears, the fast-moving vanguard of the armored division, relying on speed to avoid serious confrontation. But the Axis knew better. They knew the speed was a necessity, not a luxury. They understood that the Greyhound's performance was directly tied to its lightweight, which was, tragically, a measure of its vulnerability. The shift in tactical engagement was evident on the battlefields of Italy and, increasingly, in the late stages of the fighting in Normandy. German infantry patrols, having received the updated intelligence sheets, began to employ new, focused ambush tactics. They no longer retreated when an M8 was sighted. They waited. The air was still, thick with the damp soil of the French hedgerows. The crew of the M8, traversing a narrow country lane, relied on the drone of the engine and the radio static as their only company. The German troops, hidden in the dense foliage, weren't waiting for a tank. They were waiting for a thinly armored car. As the M8 swept past, the ambush began not with the deep, concussive boom of a Paquet-40, but with the high-pitched, terrifying rip of the MG-42. It was a relentless, sustained burst of 1,200 rounds per minute, spewing a torrent of 92mm SS Mk armor-piercing rounds. The initial impact was catastrophic. The rounds, striking the 9.5mm side armor, punched clean through the metal, creating deadly spall, superheated metal fragments that ricocheted inside the tight fighting compartment. The crew experienced a horrifying moment of realizing their perceived safety was a lie. Their metal cocoon instantly transformed into a deadly shredder. Quote, a fictionalized yet historically rooted account of an M8 crewman's terror based on post-war accounts. The sound wasn't like being hit by a tank shell. It was more like someone emptied a giant bag of gravel onto a tin roof, but that gravel was hot steel that was coming inside. I saw sparks, heard screaming, and the smell of burning oil and blood. We thought we were safe from everything but a big gun. We were wrong. It was the little bullets that killed us. The operational statistics soon reflected this new, grim reality. Reports began flowing back to American headquarters, detailing an unusual increase in M8 crew casualties from small arms fire and machine gun penetration. The rate of catastrophic losses, vehicles that were not just disabled, but completely incinerated or riddled with shrapnel, rose disproportionately compared to other armored vehicles. The M8 had a severe design flaw that compounded its armor weakness: the placement of the engine and fuel tanks. A clean penetration of the thin side armor often resulted in striking the fuel lines or the engine block itself. The resulting fires, combined with the limited escape hatches, made survival a desperate gamble. The psychological impact on the M8 crews was immense. They began to realize the M8 was not an armored car. It was a truck with a sheet metal skin. They started welding on scavenged track links, sandbags, and any available scrap metal, a futile improvised attempt to mitigate a fundamental design flaw. They were fighting the machine gun bullets with sheer hope. The Italian engineers' analysis had done its job. It created operational terror. The speed of the Greyhound, once its greatest asset, became its chief liability, leading the crews into ambushes where the enemy was waiting, not with anti-tank guns, but with an open-fire invitation to a death by 1,000 small holes. The narrative of the M8, from the pride of American industry to the haunted target of the infantry's heavy machine gun, was tragically complete. The detailed Italian intelligence report on the M8 Greyhound had an effect that went far beyond the frontline ambushes. It sent a strategic ripple effect throughout the Axis high command, influencing production, tactics, and propaganda. The key takeaway for the Germans was not just the M8's vulnerability, but the realization of a fundamental flaw in American armored doctrine, a focus on mass production and multi-role capability over specialized protection. The M8 served as a tangible, captured example of the Allied reliance on speed and quantity. The immediate German response was twofold. 1. Weapon prioritization. They began prioritizing the distribution of SMK armor-piercing ammunition to frontline infantry units, particularly those armed with the MG42. The simple, cheap, and readily available ammunition suddenly gained strategic value. 2. Propaganda and morale. The information was subtly but effectively integrated into morale boosters. German troops were told that the American machines were fast but hollow, that their advanced appearance was a bluff. This bolstered the confidence of the weary German infantry, giving them a specific, actionable task that countered the overwhelming feeling of being outgunned. Perspective from the other side. How the Allies eventually reacted. American commanders, initially slow to understand the root cause of the M8's high loss rate, began to realize the problem was systemic. They attempted to issue battlefield modifications, such as adding perforated applique armor kits, a bolted-on secondary layer of steel designed to catch incoming rounds. But these were often too little, too late, and the added weight compromised the vehicle's primary asset, speed. The problem, however, was fundamentally an industrial one. The M8 was a product of the T-52 design competition, where the requirements favored a light vehicle that could also perform as a tank destroyer. The compromise resulted in a vehicle that was neither a great tank destroyer, its 37mm gun was quickly obsolete, nor a truly protected armored car. The strategic fallout led to the accelerated development and deployment of its successor, the M20 armored utility car, which was essentially an M8 chassis stripped of the heavy and often useless turret. By removing the 37mm gun, the M20 became purely a command and reconnaissance vehicle, accepting its role as a thinly protected runner rather than a fire support vehicle. The M20 crew had no illusions of fighting back. They were expected to be faster and better at hiding. The Italian analysis also fed into the development of improvised anti-tank tactics. German Jagdkommandos, hunter teams, began to focus training on exploiting the top armor weakness. They practiced the use of the Panzerfaust and Panzerschreck, not just against tanks, but against the light-armored cars, aiming for the engine deck in the confident knowledge that even a glancing blow would often penetrate and cause a catastrophic fire. The ultimate irony of the M8's vulnerability is that it became a template for what not to build in the future. The post-war shift in armored car design focused heavily on increased protection, realizing that maneuverability alone was not enough to survive the increasingly sophisticated small arms and RPG threats. The M8's sacrifice revealed a critical truth. The crew is the most valuable asset, and their protection cannot be compromised. The captured Greyhound, sitting in the dusty Roman test range, became a silent professor, teaching the Axis the secrets of the Allied playbook. It highlighted the risk of technical compromise in military design, and it provided the weary German and Italian infantry with a concrete, achievable target to strike back against the seemingly endless flow of American mechanization. It was a small victory for intelligence and a terrible one for the young men riding in the M8's thinly skinned hull. The Second World War eventually ground to its inevitable conclusion, but the lessons learned from the captured M8 Greyhound echoed long after the last shot was fired. The story of the Italian mechanics who exposed the vehicle's flaw is not just an anecdote of wartime intelligence. It's a profound study of how small technological details can drive monumental strategic shifts. The M8 Greyhound, despite its profound vulnerability, served in every theater of the war, a testament to American industrial power and the urgent need to field vehicles quickly. Over 8,500 units were produced, serving until the end of the conflict and beyond, being sold to countless nations post-war. Its speed, reliability, and six-wheel drive were undeniable assets in logistics and command roles. But its legacy is forever defined by its thin skin. The men who crewed the M8s understood the risk. Their experience was one of constant vigilance, knowing that a hidden German with an MG-42 could end their mission, and their lives, with a single burst. This was the enduring human cost of the technical compromise identified by Major Rossi and Captain Rizzo. The knowledge that a basic machine gun bullet could defeat their armor was a heavy psychological burden they carried into every patrol. The episode of the captured M8 is a perfect microcosm of the technological arms race of the war. The Axis, unable to match the sheer industrial output of the Allies, relied on intelligence, engineering brilliance, and tactical innovation to level the playing field. The Italian mechanics, through rigorous testing and precise ballistics, transformed a perceived strength of the American Army, its rapid mechanization, into a known weakness. They validated the power of the simple, yet effective, armor-piercing round against the philosophy of lightweight design. This revelation forced the Allies to reconsider the role of their armored reconnaissance vehicles, leading to the gradual phasing out of the M8 in front-line roles and influencing the design requirements for future light-armored vehicles to possess superior protection. Today, the M8 Greyhound stands as a museum piece, a beautiful, sleek machine that represents a specific, flawed moment in military engineering history. It is a reminder that in war, speed and mobility are never a substitute for protection, and that the quiet work of engineers and mechanics analyzing the material truth of a weapon can be as strategically decisive as the actions of a general on the battlefield. Major Rossi's initial suspicion, the sound of Captain Rizzo's Mauser rounds hitting the thin steel, the terror of the American crewmen as the spall flew, these are the elements that comprise the true, complex narrative of the M8 Greyhound. It was an excellent design, built for a war that was already changing, and its flaw was exposed by the very enemy it was meant to scout. The thin skin of the Greyhound was, tragically, the thin line between life and death for its crews, and a vital piece of intelligence that helped the Axis fight a desperate, protracted war. If you found the detailed analysis of this historical vulnerability and the human experience compelling, please take a moment to like this video and leave a comment below. Tell us which piece of World War II technology you think was the most misunderstood. And of course, subscribe for more deep dives into the strategic, technological and human stories that defined the greatest conflict in history.